Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this new Pile album, Green and Gray. Pile are a Boston-based indie rock band, and around 2009's Jerk Routine album, I out of nowhere kind of got really obsessed with these guys. It's actually a really fascinating album that gets genuinely heavy at times, mostly due to these weird post-hardcore influences that come out of nowhere. But Pile made things interesting by bringing in elements of indie rock as well as tons of harmonies. But then for a while, I kind of got very indifferent towards Pile. 2010's Magic Isn't Real just seemed a little bit too more indie for me, and just sort of shied away from some of the post-hardcore elements that made their debut so interesting. And honestly, I was just as indifferent on Dripping. But with 2015's You're Better Than This, Pile really won me back in a big way. This album is crushing, and on paper, might be their best album. It really brought in a lot of the elements that I originally obsessed over when it came to Pile, the post-hardcore influences, the harmonies, the blend of all these genres, and the emotional vocals were here as well in spades. And 2017's A Hair Shirt of Purposes, wasn't a bad album, certainly wasn't a very good album either, it wasn't winning me over or anything like that, but it reminded me what I enjoyed with Pile, and it kept me interested in the band just enough. Now, heading into this new album, I thought that some of these singles were some of the best they've dropped in years, so I've actually been really excited to chat about this album for a while. Let's do it. This album starts off with Firewood, and honestly, this is exactly where I want to hear Pile start off. I love how slow-paced and just intense this track is. And trust me, yes, intense is absolutely the word to use here. Sure, honestly, this one doesn't maybe hit as hard as some of their early works, but instantly, I feel like Pile are just bringing in so much tension. Not to mention, they're just fantastic at releasing this tension because I am at the edge of my seat every time one of these crashing guitars rolls in. With each passing second, this track just seems to get bigger and better. And frontman Rick Maguire here, he is absolutely the star. His performance is incredible. I love how genuinely emotional he gets at times, and this is an absolutely star-worthy performance. Talk about range. This guy goes from sounding like some brooding monster on the verses to exploding in this glorious emotional chorus so easily. Hell, there's even a slight spoken word element to the verses, which honestly I think really plays some of the band's strengths. It's also seriously beautiful in the final moment. This is a great Pile intro. Then we have your performance, and right off the bat, Pile are once again building tons of tension. Once again, this is just such a massive, crushing tune, even though it's really not the heaviest thing I've heard for this year. As a matter of fact, it's far from it. I love the sluggish pace to this one that just sort of slowly builds up a little bit of speed, as well as the lyrics here that are just so surreal. It's scratching all sorts of itches for me. The chorus on this one is a little bit more out of control, constantly winding. Not to mention, this is just such a muscular tune, sprinkling in sort of melodic elements just enough to make this one really hook home. It's a really quick track, but Pile end up really wrapping up their ideas very quickly. And Rick's final screams here are some of his most intense of the album. That's right, it's moments like this that I really feel like the cult following that these guys have amassed a couple of years is absolutely justified. A couple of tracks later, Hair gives me the chills right from these opening notes. There's almost a Benji-era Sun Kill Moon vibe going on here. There's just such a great sorrow to this that I can't ignore. And Rick's performance here is absolutely gutting. Lyrically, this continues down that same path. It's very surreal, it's very hard to put your finger on, and it's certainly not easy to digest. It almost has a very dreamlike quality to it, but it makes for a very interesting listen. I'm actually surprised with just how much I have to say about this album, but it makes me happy. These are barn burners, folks. These are tracks that need room to grow, and you need to sit with them. And that meditative humming on this track is just so pleasing. And by the end of this one, once again, I'm in tears by just how beautiful this track becomes. Hair is probably the best track here. A Labyrinth with No Center, on the other hand, has almost a mystical feel to it. It's a very vast-sounding track, and I do like the extended pluck guitars here. But out of freaking nowhere, this track completely gets out of control very fast in a big way, in a way that I'm almost getting Every Time I Die vibes by the time we get to this chorus. It's melodic, but it's also completely bizarre. It's a really strange track. Like, Rick here, as a frontman, seems his most fragile, like, especially hopping between these very slow verses to this very freakish chorus. It's very interesting, to say the least. Like, the Labyrinth it's named after, this track is just full of endless twists and turns, and some of the post-hardcore chugging riffs in the last minute, some of the most intense moments here. And late in the album, Hiding Places has a sense of serenity right off the bat that I actually really connect with. Not only that, but this track is continuing to be just so hulking, so massive, each guitar riff just searing through everything else on the track. And Rick's performance here is so pensive. It's really not his usual style at all, but it's actually really heartfelt here and pretty stunning. It's a track that sounds like it could go up in flames at any moment. And in the final moments here, the guitar just gets so anthemic. Just when it sounds like this track could literally run out of gas at any moment, it's a really fascinating track. There are also a handful of tracks on here, like On a Bigger Screen, that show Pyle really toning things up a couple of notches and going for a much more straightforward punk sound. Like, it's so much more straightforward and shows Pyle just diving right in with these punk riffs. To be honest, it actually works in their favor because here, Rick actually sounds like a damn ringleader. It's a wild track, one that's very blink and you'll miss it. You may want to give it a couple of tries to really get some of the details out of it. But trust me, it's still a Pyle track. It's still just as emotional, just as barn-burning. Now, personally, I do still think that last 40 seconds here could have been its own standalone track. But that's just me. Still, awesome tune. We get tracks like The Soft Hands of Stephen Miller here, which literally make it sound like Pyle had been doing this more straightforward sound for years. Now, I used the term ringleader earlier, and if that was the case then, it's double the case now. Like, here he sounds like he's at some swirling mass at a hardcore show trying to preach to everybody as they race by and just trying frantically to get to everyone. It's in your face, it's demeaning, it's brutal. This one just excites the hell out of me. And the nonsensical gibberish that he throws out at the chorus, like, it's literally one of the most ridiculous things about this album, but it works. Like, so much so that you would think that this is their normal sound. I love Rick's very soulful singing and the bluesy guitars on Bruxist Grin. Once again, it's also one of the more straightforward tracks here and easiest to analyze. Dare I say, it might be the catchiest track here. And I feel like on paper, a bug on its back should really annoy me. There is no tension here in sight. As a matter of fact, it's just release after release, and that's something that I usually am not really vibing very hard with Pyle's music. But here there's an intensity and an urgency that I think really makes this track work. And Rick's performance here is brilliant. So honestly, overall, I think this is a pretty great album from Pyle. I mean, there are a few tracks here that I think are just more meh than anything. Other Moons, for example, shortest track of the bunch. It's very dreamy, it's very slow-paced, it's very dreary. But honestly, my only real issue here is that this track just seems a little too straightforward for my liking. Like, I just feel like Pyle are just so much more capable with a track like this. Rick's performance is genuine, it's heartfelt, all of that. I just feel like this, I don't know, I just feel like this could have been a lot more. And Lord of Calendars is probably my least favorite track here. Like, I don't know, like a lot of the more straightforward punk tunes here work out pretty well, but this track, on the other hand, is like a real example of why it's not the route that I want to see Pyle going down completely. This one is just sort of cheap. It instantly dives into just straight release after release with no build-up whatsoever. And lyrically, this is just such a major down point compared to the rest of the album. And while this is like far from the longest track here, it just feels so much longer. And My Employer might be the most mellow track of the bunch. Lyrically, it is pretty fascinating and actually a real highlight. But I don't know, this is just so broken down, so dreary once again. Like, this is like some legitimate slowcore. Like, if you're into bands in those genres, check this out. But, like, this isn't for me. It's truly emotional and seriously depressive in parts. But nothing about this really hooks me in. Outside of that, though, hell yes, this is a great Pyle album. Like, this is exactly where I want to hear these guys these days. Bringing in elements of post-hardcore and slowcore even in parts. Bringing it in with heavy crushing guitar riffs and genuinely emotional performances as well as harmonies and indie rock influences. It's just great. And honestly, No Hands is like the only proper ending I could have come up with. In an interesting way, this actually comes off like almost like a continuation of this album's opener. It's pensive, it's slow-paced, and it's unbearably emotional at times. And Rick's performance here, like, I can't say enough good things about these guys' vocal performances. They're just so intense. It's a very subtle track with a seriously delicate instrumental, which I wasn't expecting, but it has such a presence to it. And the songwriting here is some of the strongest on this entire album, which is honestly saying something. Like, it's the only seriously viable ending I could have come up with to this album. So overall, yeah, this is a great album from Pile. It may not be their best, may not be their catchiest, but they're at a really great point in their career where they're putting out some of their best material, especially with this string of last albums. The songwriting is concrete, the performances are emotional, the guitars are so heavy. These guys work great at building tension and releasing it. Just, I can't say enough great things about Pile right now, and I just think that this is another very solid album to add to their collection. I'm feeling it like a decent 8 on this right now, but let me know what you guys think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you guys would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, guys.